Principals do not need to administer every assessment, but they must create the conditions for compliant, student-centered administration. Welcome. This is not intended to turn principals into ELPAC technicians. It does focus on the leadership decisions only you can make. Selecting the right coordinator, providing adequate staffing and time, monitoring progress, and protecting students and test security. By the end, you should know what belongs to your leadership checklist and what evidence you should request from your Site ELPAC Testing Coordinator and when to involve assessment services. Before we begin, I want you to know who is supporting this work at the district level. Assessment Services is a district support team, but successful administration depends on a working partnership with site leadership. Assessment Services sits within the Data Insight and System Support Division. Each specialist has an assigned program or programs, but our work overlaps whenever testing, technology, student data, accessibility, or security intersect. For ELPAC questions, I'm your primary LEA contact. I am available on Microsoft Teams most district workdays from approximately 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please contact me early. A 5-minute conversation before testing is usually easier than correcting a problem after a domain has started. With that support structure in mind, let us focus on the leadership conditions that make ELPAC work at a school site. Principal leadership determines whether ELPAC administration is proactive, consistent, and student-centered, or reactive and rushed. Your role is not to master every Tom screen, but your role is to put the right people in place, protect the timeline, and maintain the safeguards that will produce valid results. The 3 areas on this slide work together. Even a strong coordinator cannot succeed without enough trained test examiners, protected time, usable devices, secure space, and principal support when follow-up is needed. As you listen today, consider which of these 3 areas, people, timeline, or safeguards, needs the most attention at your site. These leadership decisions matter because ELPAC results immediately affect students and their educational pathways. Timely, accurate ELPAC administration connects students to appropriate services, instruction, progress monitoring, and family information. For a newly enrolled student, the initial ELPAC helps determine whether English learner services are needed. A delay is not merely a missed date. It may delay appropriate language support and instructional planning. For identified English learners, summative results document annual progress and contribute to reclassification decisions, family communication, and school and district reporting. The most important point is that testing must be prompt, accurate, and conducted under conditions that allow the student to show what they know. To provide support correctly, principals need a simple understanding of the 4 ELPAC pathways. The assessment pathway depends on whether the student is being identified initially or measured annually, and whether the IEP team has a designated alternate assessment participation note indicated. The initial ELPAC and the initial alternate ELPAC are identification assessments. Eligible students must complete the appropriate initial assessment within 30 calendar days of enrollment, while the summative ELPAC and the summative alternate ELPAC measure their annual English language development for students identified as English learners until they are reclassified. The alternate ELPAC is not selected simply because a student receives special education services. It is an IEP team decision for a student with the most significant cognitive disabilities and must be reflected on the current locked IEP. For compliance purposes, the ELPAC participation is required. A parent may decline English learner services, but there is no parent opt-out from the ELPAC assessment requirement. Alternate assessment decision deserves an additional leadership safeguard because they affect more than one testing program. Alternate assessment participation is an individualized IEP team decision that must be documented and implemented consistently. A disability label, instructional placement, or assumption that a student is not diploma-bound is not enough. The IEP team uses state participation criteria and documents in the decision in the final IEP. For California alternate assessments, participation decisions must be coordinated across applicable content areas. Once a student begins an assessment, the system will not allow the switch pathways because the team later believes another test might be easier or more appropriate. Contact assessment services before making any change that could affect an assessment already started. On this slide, certified examiner means staff member who has completed the required current year trainings, and it does not mean the examiner must hold a teaching credential. Clear participation decisions are a part of the principal's broader accountability for the site. The SETC manages daily operations, but the principal remains accountable for the staffing, security, and timeline conditions at the school. The SETC runs the operational work, coordinating your schedules, verifying student settings, monitoring sessions, maintaining records, and communicating concerns. The principal does not need to perform those tasks personally. What cannot be delegated is the leadership accountability. The principal ensures the SETC has the authority, time, equipment, secure storage, trained staff, and access to leadership when a problem requires a decision. Designating a coordinator and then waiting until the end of the window for an update is a common error that people make. Delegation without oversight creates avoidable risk. Because so much depends on this role, selecting the SETC is one of the most important ELPAC decisions a principal makes. Selecting the SETC is a leadership decision, not a clerical assignment or an automatic duty for an assistant principal. Designate one SETC so the site has a clear line of communication and accountability. Look for someone who is organized, technology comfortable, responsive, trusted by staff, and available across the school year. An assistant principal may be an excellent choice, but the title alone does not make someone the best coordinator. Running reports, reconciling records, following detailed procedures, and persistently following up with adults requires a particular skill set and enough protected time. The principal should also accept the ELPAC World invitation. That access provides continuity. If the SETC is absent because of illness, leave, transfer, or promotion, is your current coordinator able to do the work consistently, and do they have the time and authority to follow through? Once the coordinator is selected, the next question is how the work is divided between the SETC and test examiners. One SETC coordinates the system. Enough trained test examiners administer the assessments. The SETC is the primary contact and maintains the site-wide view, eligible students, schedules, TOMS information, documentation, progress, and closeout. Test examiners work directly with the students. Depending on grade and domain, testing may be one-to-one, small group, or group administered according to the manual, which is called a DFA. The SETC may also serve as a test examiner when appropriately trained, but selecting a SETC does not automatically solve the site's examiner staffing needs. Build a realistic staffing plan with backups before the window opens. Fortunately, principals have more staffing options than they sometimes realize. Sites can protect classroom instruction by using a broader pool of eligible trained San Diego Unified employees as test examiners. Test examiners are not limited to classroom teachers. Depending on the assessment and the assignment, sites may use certificated staff, classified employees, district hourly staff, or eligible retired employees who are currently employed by San Diego Unified and meet all training requirements. Potential staff can include specialists, counselors, site leaders, instructional assistants, bilingual assistants, approved tutors, or appropriately rehired retirees. They must have the communication skills needed to administer the standardized directions accurately. Assessment Services does not pay for site training time or select staff for the principal. Staffing and scheduling remain site leadership responsibilities. Whomever you select, training must be complete before they access secure systems or administer an assessment. Current year training is a prerequisite, not an item to complete after testing begins. The SETC must complete the required annual Site Coordinator training before receiving and retaining the necessary TOMS access. Test examiners must complete the applicable annual training before administering the initial, summative, or alternate ELPAC. Speaking and writing responsibilities require certain specific certification components. Alternate ELPAC must be administered by a trained educator who knows the student, understands the student's communication system, and is familiar with the supports used during daily instruction. The SETCs should keep current certificates on file, and the principal should ask for confirmation that the staffing roster and training records match. Don't assume that last year's training carries over. ELPAC training requirements are annual. When the coordinator, staffing, or training plan is weak, the consequences are predictable. Weak coordination increases student impact, staff workload, compliance risks, and last-minute principal involvement. These are not theoretical concerns. Late initial testing can delay language supports. A single absent or untrained test examiner can stop testing. Incomplete monitoring allows paused domains, expired sessions, missing scores, or unentered information to remain unresolved. Security concerns may require formal reporting, investigation, and corrective action. Conflicting communication causes staff to follow different directions and often pulls the principal into an emergency that could have been prevented. The best prevention is a capable coordinator, adequate time, trained backups, brief principal check-ins, and early communication with assessment services. The work becomes much easier to oversee when principals view it as 4 predictable checkpoints across the year. Principal oversight is most effective at 4 planned checkpoints rather than only when a problem occurs. At the start of the year, name one SETC. Accept your ELPAC World invitation and confirm training and access. Throughout the year, monitor new enrollments because the initial ELPAC has a 30-day calendar day requirement. From November through January, confirm trained test examiners and backups, review accessibility needs, approve the schedule, and make sure the devices and secure space are available. During the summative window, request regular completion updates, support makeups, and confirm secure closeout. As you can see, the slide footer references the state windows. San Diego Unified operates dates different than those and recommends our target be earlier, such as for the ELPAC being 95% complete before spring break. So with that distinction between an official state window and a practical district target is essential. The state closing date is not the date a site should plan to finish. The official initial ELPAC administration year runs July 1st, this year, 2026, through June 30th, 2027. The summative window is February 1st through May 31st, 2027. San Diego Unified's goal is to complete general summative testing before spring break, leaving the remaining weeks for new students, students with chronic absences, incomplete domains, makeups, scoring entry, and reconciliation. TOMS reflects actively enrolled students only. For the 26-27, San Diego Unified's active enrollment window will be August 10th through May 26th. Do not treat May 31st as a usable site target because student data will no longer be available after active enrollment closes. Planning early also creates rooms for students who enter or change eligibility during the summative window. New enrollment and mobility continue during testing, so eligibility and monitoring cannot stop when the initial schedule is built. A student who completes the initial ELPAC during the summative window and is identified as an English learner must also complete the summative ELPAC within the same active window. That is why the SETC needs regular communication with the front office and must continue checking eligibility, not only the original roster from February 1st. Students who transfer to a private school or out of state may still affect your participation reporting depending on when they were enrolled and accountable. Chronic absence also does not remove the requirement. Document persistent attempts and escalate early enough for leadership to intervene. These complexities explain why ELPAC planning is built around full participation rather than a minimum threshold. The site goal is to assess every eligible English learner. ELPAC does not have a parent opt-out. Principals often hear the 95% benchmark associated with CASP accountability. ELPAC is different. San Diego Unified School District's operational expectation is 100% participation for every eligible student. That requires early testing cohorts, scheduled makeup opportunities, active monitoring of chronic absences, and immediate follow-up when a student remains unstarted or incomplete. A family may decline English learner services, but the student must still participate in the ELPAC until reclassified. Domain exemptions are separate IEP-driven decisions and are not parent opt-outs. Full participation also depends on protecting the validity of the alternate assessment decisions. Alternate ELPAC must be administered consistently by a trained educator who knows the student and the student's communication system. The IEP determines participation using the alternate assessment criteria and documents the decision in the current IEP. The SETC implements that decision. The coordinator should not independently decide that a student should take an alternate assessment. Administration is one-on-one, and the examiner should be the educator most familiar with the student, the student's preferred communication modes, and the supports used during daily instruction. The goal is standardized administration without removing the student's established means of access. One common mistake is for us not to introduce an unfamiliar support for the first time on test day or change the assessment pathway after a component has begun without contacting assessment services. With staffing, participation, and timelines established, principal oversight can be reduced to 5 practical questions. So principals do not need to run every report. They need evidence that staffing, eligibility, accessibility, progress, and security are actively managed. Use these questions during brief check-ins with your SETC. Ask whether staffing and backups are ready, whether newly eligible students are scheduled, whether accessibility resources are correct, what the reports show, and whether secure materials are reconciled. The key is timing. Ask these questions in the final week identifies problems. Asking them throughout the window creates opportunities to solve them. Which report or piece of evidence will your SETC bring to your check-in so that you can verify progress rather than simply hear that testing is going fine? The next slide turns these questions into a manageable monitoring rhythm. A short, predictable monitoring cadence prevents long lists of unresolved students at the end of a window. For the initial ELPAC, the SETC should review new enrollment and the 30-day timeline at least weekly. During the summative window, review completion weekly from the beginning and increase them frequently as district targets and active enrollment closeout approach. Ask about students who are unstarted, paused, expired, incomplete, missing a score, or newly eligible. Also, ask whether speaking scores or other required entries have been complete and whether staffing or attendance is creating a pattern. This can be a 5 or 10-minute standing agenda item. The goal is not another meeting. It is timely decisions. Two subjects deserve explicit principal attention at every checkpoint: accessibility and security. Accessibility provides equitable access. Test security preserves standardized conditions, valid results, and public trust. Accessibility resources must match current student documentation and actual need. The students should already use those supports during daily instruction. Testing day is not the time to introduce an unfamiliar tool or accommodation. And the IEP team decides alternate ELPAC participation. The SETC verifies that TOM reflects those decisions and that the examiner understands how to implement the student supports appropriately. Security belongs to everyone. Only trained and authorized staff may administer. Secure content may never be photographed, copied, discussed, shared, or left unattended. Principals should prevent walkthroughs and visitors from interrupting active testing. If a concern occurs, stop or secure the affected activity when appropriate and contact assessment services immediately. Do not independently investigate, coach staff on responses, or try to repair a possible breach before reporting it. Security responsibility extends beyond the staff who log into TOMS or administer tests. Staff who may encounter secure testing, even if they never administer, must understand and acknowledge their security responsibilities. The non-TOMS user security affidavit is an annual requirement for employees who may enter a testing location or unexpectedly encounter secure materials. Examples include principals and assistant principals conducting walkthroughs, nurses responding to staffs, office staff, custodians and substitute custodians, campus assistants, security personnel, technology staff, and maintenance staff. Signing the affidavit does not authorize anyone to administer an assessment. It confirms that the employee understands how to protect secure content and what to do if it is encountered. Verify that applicable staff complete the affidavit before secure materials are delivered or testing begins. Affidavits establish responsibility, chain of custody procedures. They protect the actual materials. Secure materials must be controlled, accounted for, and handled only through approved return or destruction procedures. The SETC should document receipt, store materials in a locked location with limited access, track distribution, and return and reconcile everything after testing. Secure materials may not be photographed, copied, left in classrooms, or sent through ordinary school mail. Follow specific assessment services direction for secured destruction or in-person return to Annex 3. You need to immediately report any missing materials, exposure of test content, improper assistance, unauthorized access, or an unexplained account discrepancy must be reported right away. Preserve the facts and contact assessment services before taking any corrective action. Some student responses create a different kind of urgent reporting responsibility through the Crisis Alert System, also known as CARS. A CARS notification is an immediate student safety alert and must be routed to the appropriate site personnel without delay. During hand scoring, a reader may see a response suggesting possible abuse, neglect, self-harm, harm due to others, or serious distress. ETS and the CDE readers do not diagnose or investigate. They notify the district so local personnel can respond. Assessment services will forward the alert to site staff positioned to evaluate the situation and follow district protocols, including mandated reporting responsibilities when applicable. Make sure the site contact information is current and treat a CARS notification as a time-sensitive and confidential. For routine communication, deadlines, resources, principals, and SETCs should rely on one centralized source. ELPAC World. ELPAC World is your centralized source of truth for site communication, resources, deadlines, and updates. Access is limited to the principal and one designated SETC to reduce conflicting messages. The SETC is Assessment Services' primary site contact and should monitor postings and act on them. Principal access is a continuity coverage, not a second coordinator role. Please accept the invitation so information remains available if the SETC is absent because of leave, illness, transfer, or promotion. Forwarded screenshot, old emails, and last year's files should not replace the current ELPAC World posting. Let us close by turning today's information into 5 immediate leadership actions. Successful ELPAC administration begins with clear ownership, early preparation, regular monitoring, and prompt communication. Before leaving today, confirm one capable SETC, accept your ELPAC World invitation, verify trained test examiners and backup, and place brief progress check-ins on your calendar. You don't need to know every ELPAC answer. You do need to know who owns the work, what evidence shows the site is on track, and when to ask for help. Please contact Assessment Services before a concern becomes a crisis. Early questions protect students, staff, timelines, and test security. Thank you for providing the leadership conditions that make secure, accurate, and student-centered ELPAC administration possible.